Sometimes the smallest message changes everything before you even understand why. That thought stayed with me from the moment my phone vibrated halfway through my morning lecture. I glanced down beneath the desk and saw only 6 simple words on the screen. Meet me after your last class. The sender was Lucas Bennett. My heart immediately began beating faster. I read the message again, hoping I had misunderstood it, but the words never changed. I slipped my phone back into my pocket before my professor noticed, yet I could not focus on a single sentence for the rest of the lecture. Every possibility raced through my mind. Maybe Lucas wanted to apologize again for everything that had happened after the storm. Maybe another rumor had appeared online. Maybe someone had discovered something neither of us expected. Or maybe he simply wanted to return to pretending none of this had ever happened. By lunchtime, the message had already become the only thing I could think about. Tyler Carter, my roommate, sat across from me in the student dining hall while casually eating a sandwich. He looked at me for less than 5 seconds before shaking his head. "You have checked your phone at least 20 times, he said with a grin. "Either your family won the lottery, or someone important finally texted you." I hesitated before showing him the screen. Tyler read the message once and immediately leaned back in his chair. "Lucas Bennett?" he asked. I nodded. "He only wrote 1 sentence. That is all." Tyler laughed softly. "That somehow makes it even more mysterious." I smiled nervously instead of answering. Around us, students talked about assignments, weekend plans, and the upcoming football game, but I noticed more than a few familiar faces quietly glancing in my direction before whispering to one another. Although the rumors from the previous week had slowly faded, they had never disappeared completely. Some people still believed there had been something unusual about the night I stayed at Lucas's apartment during the storm. They never knew the truth behind the canceled shuttle, the dead phone battery, or the simple kindness that had started everything. After lunch, I walked across campus toward my afternoon classes beneath bright blue skies that looked completely different from the storm clouds I remembered so clearly. The maple trees lining the sidewalks had begun turning shades of gold and orange, and a cool breeze carried fallen leaves across the brick pathways. Everything looked peaceful, yet my thoughts remained restless. Every time my phone vibrated with an ordinary campus notification, I hoped it would be another message from Lucas. Nothing came. The final class of the day seemed longer than every lecture before it. I glanced at the clock so often that even my professor smiled in my direction once before continuing the lesson. When the dismissal finally came, I packed my notebook almost too quickly and stepped into the crowded hallway. Students streamed toward the exits, filling the corridor with conversation and laughter. I looked around, wondering where Lucas expected me to meet him. Before I could send a reply asking for details, I noticed him standing quietly near the large windows at the end of the hallway. He was wearing a dark jacket over a simple sweater, one hand resting inside his pocket, calmly waiting while afternoon sunlight reflected across the polished floor behind him. Several students slowed their pace after recognizing him. More than one person turned toward me, then back toward Lucas, clearly realizing that he was waiting for someone. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway, and for the first time since everything had happened, Lucas smiled without hesitation. Then he took one slow step toward me and said the words that made every sound around us seem to disappear. "There is somewhere I have wanted to take you since the night we first met in the rain." For a moment, I simply stood there, unable to move. Lucas waited patiently, as though he understood that my silence came from surprise rather than uncertainty. Around us, the hallway slowly emptied as students headed toward the parking lots, residence halls, and campus cafes. A few curious glances drifted in our direction before disappearing just as quickly. The rumors that had once followed us everywhere no longer felt as loud, but they had left behind enough curiosity that people still noticed whenever we stood together. "Are you coming?" Lucas asked with a gentle smile that was warmer than anything I had seen from him before. I nodded almost immediately. "Yes." We walked side by side across the campus without speaking for several minutes. The quiet between us did not feel uncomfortable. Instead, it felt as though both of us were searching for the right words while enjoying the rare chance to simply walk together. The afternoon sunlight painted long shadows across the brick pathways, and a cool autumn breeze carried bright orange leaves past our feet. Students laughed outside the student center. Music drifted softly from an open window in the performing arts building, and somewhere in the distance the university bell announced the end of another class period. Lucas eventually turned away from the main walkway and followed a smaller path leading toward the oldest corner of campus. I recognized the route almost immediately. My heartbeat quickened. "This is where we met that night," I said quietly. Lucas glanced at me and nodded. "I hoped you would remember." The shuttle stop looked completely different beneath clear blue skies. The benches were dry, flowers surrounded the nearby sidewalks, and the heavy clouds from that storm had been replaced by bright afternoon light. It was difficult to believe this peaceful place had once been filled with pounding rain, flashing lightning, and the uncertainty that had changed both of our lives. Lucas stopped beside the same bench where I had waited alone that evening. He rested one hand against the wooden backrest before looking toward the empty road. "I have replayed that night more times than I can count," he admitted. "Not because I regret bringing you home." He paused briefly before meeting my eyes again. "Because I regret everything I never said afterward." I felt my chest tighten. "You already apologized." Lucas slowly shook his head. An apology was not enough. He took a slow breath before continuing. "After you left my apartment the next morning, I convinced myself that giving you space was the responsible thing to do. Then the photograph appeared, the rumors spread, and every conversation between us became about defending the truth instead of saying what I actually wanted to say." I listened without interrupting. Every word sounded carefully chosen, as though he had carried them with him for weeks. "Do you know why I asked you to come here today?" he asked. I looked around the quiet shuttle stop before answering honestly. "Because this is where everything started." Lucas smiled faintly. "Exactly." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out something small. It was the same folded bus schedule that had been hanging inside the shelter on the rainy night we met. The paper had been replaced with a fresh copy, but the route numbers were identical. "I came here yesterday," he explained. "I wanted to remember what almost happened." I frowned slightly. "Almost happened?" Lucas nodded. "If I had driven home 5 minutes earlier that night, I never would have seen you waiting here alone." His words settled quietly between us. I realized how easily our paths could have missed each other forever. Lucas looked down at the folded schedule in his hand before speaking again, his voice softer than before. "Ever since that night, there has been one sentence I have wanted to tell you. I just never found the courage until now." I felt my heart race as he lifted his eyes to meet mine once again, and before he could continue, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the path behind us. Lucas lowered his voice, but before he could finish speaking, the footsteps behind us came closer. We both turned at the same time and saw a tall student jogging toward the shuttle stop with an easy smile. "I knew I would find you here," he called. Lucas let out a quiet laugh that immediately told me they knew each other well. "Ethan, this is Mason Brooks. We have been friends since my freshman year." Mason extended his hand, and I shook it politely. "So you are Ethan," he said warmly. "It is nice to finally meet the person I have heard so much about." I blinked in surprise. "You have heard about me?" Mason looked at Lucas with an amused expression before answering. "For months." Lucas sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Mason." "What?" Mason replied with a grin. "He deserves to know the truth." I looked from one of them to the other, suddenly unsure what I had missed. Mason folded his arms and leaned casually against the shelter. "Lucas has never been very good at talking about his feelings, but he has been talking about you without realizing it." Lucas looked away toward the road, clearly embarrassed. I had never imagined seeing the confident senior react like that. "The first time was weeks before the storm," Mason continued. "He told me he kept seeing the same freshmen around campus. He said you always carried too many books, always thanked the cafeteria staff, and somehow managed to smile even on rainy mornings." My eyes widened. "That was before we even met." Mason nodded. "Exactly." I slowly turned toward Lucas, searching his face for some sign that this was only a joke, but he never denied a single word. Instead, he quietly admitted, "I noticed you long before you noticed me." The breeze carried another wave of colorful leaves across the sidewalk, while everything else seemed to fade into the background. "I thought you did not even know who I was," I whispered. Lucas smiled gently. "I knew your face. I just never had a reason to introduce myself." Mason laughed softly. He came up with plenty of reasons. None of them were good enough in his opinion. Lucas gave him a look that was more embarrassed than annoyed. "You are making this sound worse than it was." "No," Mason replied. "I am making it sound exactly as it happened." He looked back at me. There were at least 3 times when he almost walked over to say hello. Once outside the library, once after a basketball game, once at the campus bookstore. Every single time he changed his mind at the last second. I could not stop smiling. The image of Lucas, who always appeared calm and fearless, quietly talking himself out of a simple conversation, felt almost impossible to imagine. Why? I finally asked. Lucas took a slow breath before answering. Because you always looked happy. I did not want to interrupt your day with someone you had never met. His honesty caught me completely off guard. There was no dramatic speech, no attempt to impress me, only quiet sincerity. Mason glanced at his watch before taking a step backward. I should leave you two alone, he said. I only came because I recognized where Lucas was headed after class. I figured today might finally be the day he stopped overthinking everything. Before walking away, he smiled at me one last time. Just so you know, he turned down more invitations than I can count because he kept saying he was waiting for the right moment. I never understood what that meant until now. After Mason disappeared down the path, silence returned to the shuttle stop. Lucas stared at the ground for a few seconds before letting out a quiet laugh. Well, he admitted, that conversation definitely did not go the way I planned. I looked at him with a smile that I could no longer hide, realizing that the person standing beside me had been carrying feelings much longer than I had ever imagined. And suddenly the sentence he had almost spoken moments earlier became more important than anything else in the world. Lucas looked at me with an expression that was both hopeful and uncertain, but before either of us could continue the conversation, my phone vibrated inside my pocket. The screen lit up with a notification from the campus social media app. At first I assumed it was another reminder about an upcoming assignment, but the uneasy look on Lucas's face made me open it anyway. My stomach immediately tightened. Someone had uploaded a photograph taken only minutes earlier. It showed Lucas and me standing together at the old shuttle stop, while talking face to face beneath the afternoon sunlight. The caption read, "Looks like the famous storm story was only the beginning." Beneath it, dozens of comments were already appearing faster than I could read them. Some students joked harmlessly. Others guessed what our relationship might be. A few insisted they had known something was happening all along. None of them knew the truth. I lowered the phone without saying anything. Lucas quietly asked, "Another post?" I nodded. Someone was watching us. He held out his hand. I gave him the phone, and he read the comments with remarkable calm before returning it to me. "I should have expected this," he said. "People are curious." I sighed. I thought everything was finally becoming normal again. Lucas looked directly into my eyes. "Do you regret coming here with me?" The answer arrived before I even had time to think. "No." His shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time since the notification appeared, a small smile returned to his face. "Then we will deal with the rest together." We started walking back toward the center of campus. The closer we came to the student union, the more obvious it became that the photograph had already spread. Conversations became quieter as we passed. More than one student glanced down at a phone before looking up at us again. Some smiled politely. Others simply watched with open curiosity. A week earlier, I probably would have lowered my head and hurried away. This time I noticed my feet slowing instead. Lucas sensed it immediately. "Are you all right?" he asked. I looked around at the students staring in our direction. My heartbeat was faster than usual, but something inside me had changed after hearing Mason's story. Lucas had spent months quietly noticing me before we ever spoke. He had protected me when the rumors first appeared. He had invited me back to the place where everything began because he wanted honesty instead of excuses. I realized I was tired of letting strangers decide how I should feel. Without saying a word, I stepped a little closer until I was walking beside Lucas instead of leaving space between us. It was a small movement, but it felt enormous. Lucas looked at me with quiet surprise. "You do not have to prove anything," he said softly. I smiled. "I know." We continued forward together. The whispers did not disappear, but somehow they no longer sounded as frightening as before. Near the entrance to the student union, a few classmates smiled and waved as though nothing unusual had happened. One even wished us a good afternoon before continuing inside. I suddenly realized that not everyone was judging us. Many people simply saw two students walking across campus. As we reached the wide stone steps leading into the building, Lucas stopped once again. The late afternoon sunlight reflected across the glass entrance behind him. He took one slow breath, looked at me with complete sincerity, and said, There is something I should have told you a long time ago, and I am not going to let another interruption stop me this time. Lucas held my gaze as the noise around the student union gradually faded into the background. Students continued walking past us, but for the first time I did not care who might be watching. His expression carried none of the confidence people usually associated with him. Instead, I saw someone who had spent too long keeping important words hidden. He took a slow breath before speaking. "The night of the storm changed more than my routine," he said quietly. "It changed the way I looked at every day afterward." I remained silent, wanting him to finish without interruption. "Before that night, you were someone I quietly noticed from across campus," he continued. "After that night, you became the first person I looked for every morning without even realizing it." My heartbeat grew louder with every sentence. Lucas lowered his eyes for a moment before smiling at himself. "I kept telling myself it was only because I wanted to make sure you were doing all right after everything that happened. Then days became weeks, and I finally admitted that I was lying to myself." A cool breeze swept through the plaza, carrying a few golden leaves between us before they settled on the stone walkway. I could not find the right words because nothing I had imagined throughout the day came close to what I was hearing now. Lucas looked back at me with complete honesty. "The rumors never frightened me because they were about us. What frightened me was the possibility that they would make you avoid me forever." I felt my chest tighten. I remembered every awkward moment after the storm. Every time we almost spoke before someone interrupted us. Every silent glance across campus when neither of us knew what to say. We had both been waiting for the other person to take the first real step. "Lucas," I finally whispered, "you never had to carry all of that by yourself." He let out a quiet laugh. "I know that now." We began walking again through the center of campus, moving more slowly than before. The afternoon crowd had started thinning as students headed home, leaving the sidewalks peaceful beneath the warm autumn light. Lucas pointed toward the campus lake where the water reflected the orange sky like polished glass. "Can we walk a little farther?" he asked. "Of course," I answered. We followed the path beside the lake until the sounds of the student union disappeared completely. A pair of ducks drifted across the calm water while a distant rowing team finished practice. Everything felt strangely peaceful after the emotional weight of the conversation. Lucas stopped near a wooden railing overlooking the lake. "There is one more thing," he said. "I almost accepted an internship in another state 2 months ago." I looked at him in surprise. "I never heard about that." He nodded. "Almost nobody did. It was a great opportunity, and everyone expected me to say yes immediately. But you did not." He smiled faintly. "No. I kept delaying my decision because every time I imagined leaving, I realized there was someone here I had not even given myself the chance to know." I stared at him, completely speechless. The realization settled over me with surprising warmth. While I had spent weeks wondering whether our meeting during the storm meant anything at all, Lucas had quietly been changing important decisions about his future without ever expecting me to notice. I stepped closer until only a small distance remained between us. "You really thought about all of that because of me?" I asked softly. Lucas nodded without hesitation. "Every single day." Before I could answer, my phone vibrated once again. This time it was not another social media notification. It was a message from Tyler that simply read, "Turn around slowly." I looked over my shoulder toward the path behind us and immediately froze when I realized we were no longer alone. I slowly turned around, expecting another wave of whispers or curious students holding up their phones. But instead I found Tyler standing a few yards away with an amused smile on his face and 2 paper coffee cups balanced carefully in his hands. He raised one of them toward me before walking closer. "You look like you could both use a break," he said casually. Relief washed over me so quickly that I laughed without meaning to. Lucas smiled as well, accepting one of the cups with a grateful nod. "Thank you," he said. Tyler looked between us for a moment before speaking again. "I also wanted to make sure neither of you believed the internet represented the entire campus." He pulled out his phone and showed us the same social media post that had spread earlier. The comments were still growing, but something had changed. Mixed among the speculation were dozens of students telling others to stop making assumptions about people they did not know. Some reminded everyone that kindness did not deserve to become gossip. Others pointed out that 2 students walking together should not become entertainment. Tyler smiled. "Most people are already getting tired of the rumors." Lucas studied the screen before handing the phone back. That is encouraging. Tyler shrugged. People eventually move on when they realize there is no drama to feed. He looked at me with a knowing expression. The important question is whether you are going to keep letting strangers decide how you live your life. His words stayed with me long after he finished speaking. After wishing us a good evening, Tyler headed back toward the residence halls, leaving Lucas and me alone beside the lake once again. The sky had begun changing into deeper shades of orange and pink as the sun slowly drifted toward the horizon. We leaned quietly against the wooden railing, watching gentle ripples spread across the water. For several peaceful minutes, neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. Finally, I looked toward Lucas. "Can I tell you something?" He turned immediately. "Always." I smiled nervously. "After the storm, I kept telling myself that you were only being kind because that is the type of person you are." Lucas listened carefully without interrupting. "Then the rumors started, and I convinced myself that staying away from you would make everything easier for both of us." I lowered my eyes toward the lake. "Every time I saw you across campus after that, I wanted to say hello. I just thought I would make your life more complicated." Lucas let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like relief. "Ethan, you never made my life complicated." I looked back at him. "Then what did I do?" He smiled with complete sincerity. "You made me look forward to ordinary days." Those simple words touched me more deeply than any grand speech ever could. I laughed softly, feeling years younger than I had that morning. "I have something else to admit." Lucas folded his arms on the railing and waited patiently. "The first time you smiled at me after the storm, I spent almost an hour wondering whether I had imagined it." Lucas laughed for the first time all afternoon, and hearing that genuine sound made the remaining tension disappear completely. "I definitely smiled," he admitted. "Probably more than once." We looked at each other, both realizing how many opportunities had been lost simply because we had been afraid of misunderstanding one another. The distance between us no longer felt uncertain. It felt comfortable, natural. As the first evening lights began glowing across campus, I took a slow breath and decided I was finished hiding behind fear. Before Lucas could say another word, I looked directly into his eyes and quietly confessed, "I think I stopped seeing you as just the senior who helped me on a rainy night a long time ago, and I have been trying to pretend that was not true ever since." For a few long seconds, Lucas did not say anything. The evening breeze stirred the surface of the lake, and the last rays of sunlight reflected across the water like ribbons of gold. I wondered if I had spoken too soon, if I had ruined the quiet understanding we had finally built between us. Then Lucas smiled. Not the polite smile he showed classmates across campus, but the genuine one that always reached his eyes. "I was hoping you would say that someday," he admitted softly. "I just never expected to hear it before I found the courage to say everything I needed to." I laughed quietly, feeling both relieved and embarrassed. "I guess I surprised both of us." Lucas nodded. "You definitely surprised me." We stood side by side in comfortable silence before he spoke again. "There is still something important you deserve to know before either of us takes another step." His voice became more serious, and I turned toward him. "I graduate in a few months." I nodded slowly. "I know. After graduation, everything changes," he continued. "Jobs, internships, different cities. I have no idea where life will take me yet. That uncertainty is the reason I kept convincing myself not to get close to you." I listened carefully, recognizing that every word came from honesty rather than fear. "I thought it would be selfish," Lucas said. "You are just beginning your college experience, and I did not want to become someone who promised you a future I could not guarantee." I looked across the lake before answering. "Do you know what I have learned over the past few weeks?" He shook his head. "Nothing in life comes with guarantees. If that storm had ended 30 minutes earlier, we never would have met. If my phone battery had lasted a little longer, I would have called for another ride. If you had driven home one street earlier, we would have remained strangers forever." Lucas smiled faintly as I continued. "The only reason we are standing here now is because neither of us can predict what tomorrow looks like." He lowered his eyes for a moment, quietly considering my words. "I spent so much time worrying about what might happen months from now," he admitted, "that I almost missed what was happening today." I stepped a little closer until our shoulders were nearly touching. "Then maybe we should stop living in imaginary futures." Lucas looked directly at me again, and I could see the uncertainty gradually disappearing from his expression. "You make everything sound much simpler than I ever could." I smiled. "Maybe because it is simple." He laughed softly. You really believe that? I do. The peaceful silence returned, but this time it felt different. It no longer carried unanswered questions. Instead, it carried quiet confidence. Lucas rested his hands on the wooden railing and looked toward the fading sunset. I do not want to keep calling you my friend when that is not how I feel anymore. My heart skipped a beat. I do not want that either, I admitted. He slowly turned toward me once more. I want to be honest about what this means. I want to spend time with you, learn everything about you, celebrate your victories, encourage you when classes become difficult, and keep showing up because I choose to, not because of a storm or an accident. His words settled gently between us, warmer than the evening air itself. Before I could answer, the lights surrounding the lake flickered on one by one, bathing the quiet path in a soft golden glow. Lucas took one steady breath, looked into my eyes with complete certainty, and began speaking the sentence that both of us had unknowingly been waiting to hear since the night our lives first crossed beneath the rain. Lucas held my gaze beneath the soft glow of the lakeside lights, and for a moment it felt as though the entire campus had disappeared. The laughter from distant students, the sound of bicycles passing along the path, even the gentle breeze across the water all faded into the background. Only his voice remained. Ethan, he said quietly, I have spent weeks trying to convince myself that waiting was the responsible choice. I kept telling myself there would always be a better time, a safer time, an easier time. But every time I imagined walking away without telling you the truth, it felt wrong. He took one slow step closer, leaving only a comfortable distance between us. I do not want another semester to pass while pretending you are only someone I happened to meet during a storm. You have become the person I think about every morning and every night. You are the first person I want to tell when something good happens, and the first person I hope is doing well when I wake up. My heart felt lighter with every word. Lucas smiled, his eyes filled with quiet certainty instead of hesitation. So I am done waiting. He paused just long enough for me to realize what was about to happen. Ethan Carter, he said gently, will you be my boyfriend? Time seemed to stop. I had imagined hearing those words more times than I could count, but nothing compared to hearing them spoken with complete sincerity. I could not stop smiling. My eyes stung with emotion, not because of sadness, but because every doubt I had carried since the storm suddenly disappeared. I looked at Lucas for a long moment before laughing softly. You know, I said, you really made me wait for that question. Lucas laughed too, the nervousness finally leaving his face. I know. I probably overthought every single step. I nodded with a grin. You definitely did. We both laughed again, and the tension that had followed us for weeks melted away completely. Then I answered the question that mattered most. Yes, I said without hesitation. I would love to be your boyfriend. Lucas closed his eyes for the briefest moment, almost as if he wanted to remember that answer forever. When he opened them again, his smile was brighter than I had ever seen before. Thank you, he whispered. I gently shook my head. You do not have to thank me. I was hoping you would ask. We began walking slowly along the lakeside path, no longer wondering where we stood with each other. The conversation flowed naturally now, filled with small dreams instead of uncertainty. Lucas talked about introducing me to his favorite little coffee shop just outside campus. I promised to show him the bookstore where I always disappeared whenever classes became stressful. We laughed about how an unexpected storm had completely rewritten both of our lives. As we reached the small bridge crossing the lake, we noticed several students walking toward us. A few recognized us from the recent rumors. Instead of whispering or staring, one student simply smiled and called out, "Have a great evening." Another waved before continuing toward the residence halls. I smiled back without feeling the slightest need to explain anything. Lucas noticed the change immediately. You are not worried anymore, he observed. I looked around at the peaceful campus glowing beneath the evening lights. No, I answered honestly, because I finally know what is true, and that matters more than what strangers decide to believe. Lucas smiled proudly. We continued across the bridge together, unaware that someone standing farther down the path had quietly lifted a phone, captured another photograph of the two of us smiling beside each other beneath the lights, and uploaded it online with a very different caption that would spread across campus before the night was over. The next morning, I woke up expecting everything to feel different. After weeks of uncertainty, misunderstandings, and wondering what Lucas truly felt, I thought becoming his boyfriend would somehow change the way I saw the world. Instead, the sunlight coming through my dorm window looked exactly the same. Students still rushed across campus carrying coffee cups and backpacks. Professors still hurried between buildings. The university continued moving forward as if nothing had changed. But something inside me had changed. For the first time in weeks, I was no longer waiting for a sign that I belonged somewhere. I already knew I did. My phone buzzed while I was getting ready for class. A message from Lucas appeared on the screen. "Good morning." I smiled immediately. It was such a simple sentence, but it carried a feeling I had never experienced before. It was no longer a mysterious message from the senior everyone admired from a distance. It was a message from someone who chose me. I met Lucas outside the library before our afternoon classes. He was standing beneath the same maple trees where we had walked together so many times before. When he saw me, his expression softened into the smile I had slowly learned to recognize. "You are early," he said. I laughed. "You are surprised?" He nodded. "A little." We walked through campus together, talking about ordinary things that somehow felt special. We discussed upcoming exams, favorite places to eat near campus, and the coffee shop Lucas promised to show me. There were no dramatic moments, no rumors, no pressure from anyone else. Just two people learning how to enjoy being together. Later that afternoon, I noticed students still talking about the new photograph from the previous night. For a brief moment, I wondered if everything would start again. I expected the same cycle of questions and assumptions. But when I opened the campus app, I saw something completely different. The photograph had spread, but the comments were not filled with speculation. Instead, students were sharing messages about how happy they were to see Lucas smiling. Some admitted they had judged too quickly before knowing the truth. Others simply wished us well. I looked at Lucas and showed him the screen. He smiled quietly. "I guess people eventually see what is real." I nodded. Sometimes they just need time. As the semester continued, our relationship became something simple and genuine. Lucas helped me prepare for difficult exams. I introduced him to my favorite hidden corners of campus. We discovered that the best moments were often the smallest ones, like sharing coffee before class or walking together after sunset. The storm that brought us together became a story we laughed about instead of a memory filled with confusion. Months later, when Lucas prepared for graduation, we both understood that the future would bring changes. There would be new opportunities, new challenges, and new places. But we also understood something more important. A relationship was not built on having every answer. It was built on choosing each other even when the future was uncertain. On his final week before graduation, Lucas took me back to the old shuttle stop where everything began. The place looked completely ordinary beneath the afternoon sun. No rain, no storm, no rumors. Just a quiet campus road where two strangers had accidentally found each other. Lucas smiled and looked at me. Funny how one unexpected night changed everything. I smiled back. Maybe it was not an accident after all. Together, we walked away from the place where our story started, knowing that the best moments in life are sometimes the ones we never planned for.